Hello, friends. I just want to take a moment, if I can, to welcome you all to the Insights World Tour. We are now virtually coming to you from India, and we will be sharing with you what I believe will be a highly insightful discussion around COVID-19. I know many of us have been thinking through this issue, but I suspect today's perspective will be a unique one. If I can remind you again, just to keep yourself muted and off video, if you don't mind, during this presentation period, and then we'll ask everyone to come back on video thereafter, where we can have an open discussion. The expectation would be that we'll be speaking, our guest speaker will speak for 15 minutes or so, and then we'll have 10 to 15 minutes of discussion to follow. I'd also like to remind you that when you think about this series, we still have a few more lectures coming after this today. So take advantage of that if you get a moment. And also reminding you that what we're doing here with this particular tour is to keep this by design as being a small interactive discussion. My name is Mohit Bhandari. I am the editor-in-chief of Ortho Evidence. And I welcome you all to this evening. And let me also remind you that today, we have, just as you can imagine, a fabulous speaker, a colleague, a friend, and a collaborator, Dr. Parag Senchetti, who, as you can see here, really needs no introduction. I'm also here, I will also virtually welcome K.H. Senchetti, who in many ways has, taught all of us. So I welcome him also, and I know there's many other esteemed friends and colleagues visiting from around the world. We're going to learn today about the 10 lessons from the COVID pandemic. And this is particularly important for those of us who are watching who are not based in India. India has had a particularly rough go in the last few weeks and few months. And I think we'll get a firsthand perspective from one of our colleagues. Parag, thank you so much for taking time with us today, and welcome to the Insights World Tour. Oh, Parag, I'll just need you to unmute your mic.
Yeah.
Super.
Thank you. Thanks, Mohit. It's indeed a great pleasure to be here. And I wish to thank you for this opportunity. And the topic which I'm going to speak on today is going to be my learnings from COVID pandemic in the last 6 months that we have been facing this issue. All of us, are in this in some way or the other. All of us have our own stories to tell, and all of us have learned lessons from this pandemic. So in the next 12 to 15 minutes, Mohit, what I would do is, I would like to just give you some of my personal revelations in this time, some insights and some lessons which I have learned in the last 6 months or so, ever since we've been hit by this pandemic and we faced the unprecedented times which sometimes have been trying, but more or less people have now learned to live with it and are coming out of this pandemic, but it's still not over. I'm going to tell you a few lessons which I have learned as a professional, as an administrator, as a family person, as a personal goal myself, something related to the community, some things related to our staff, and it'll be a combination of lessons which I have learned in the last 6 months. So if you see the first thing, we always talk about the internet, and I used to always feel whether it's necessary or not necessary to have internet. But this pandemic has proved that had we not had this internet, we wouldn't have been able to connect now. We wouldn't have been able to really interact with our friends, our professionals, and we wouldn't have been able to work from home. Telemedicine is something which we have really learned as a lesson. And I think teleconsultation has been a savior for doctors. And unless we would have had the internet, this would not have been really possible. But if you see, it's like a double-edged sword. With the advantages come the disadvantages. And it's really the social media which has completely sucked us into it. And many a times we have been wasting time on social medias, on the internet, on Instagram, on YouTube's, and it necessarily may not always be for the better and it kind of sucks you into the social media and kind of controls your thinking. And if friends, you haven't seen this documentary in Netflix, The Social Dilemma, you should see it. And it will really tell you how the social media can control and influence your life to a great extent. So I urge you to see this Netflix documentary, and I have been really influenced by it, and I have really cut down a lot. And like I said, internet is a double-edged sword, and let's avoid getting sucked into the social world. We should not get obsessed with the news. We should not be in the habit of checking every minute WhatsApp, checking every minute the news updates, because we will get influenced by it. And we know now that things change, things evolve, and we should not get obsessed with the news which is coming. I think another important thing is the time. We've always known that work expands to the time available, and therefore, even though we may have had more time in this pandemic, it is not necessarily that we've been performing better. Actually, in the initial times, I would say that in spite of having so much time, I never really gave time to its proper use, and if it wasn't used efficiently. And I always initially complained that had I had time, I would have done this, I would have done that. And in the pandemic, when we actually had the time, we could not do many things. So I think in the last 3 or 4 months, I have gathered myself together and started doing many things which I wanted to, and which I always made excuse that I didn't have time. But when I had the time, I didn't actually get down to doing it. But in the last 3 months, that's the lesson I have learned. Being chairman of Sancheti Hospital, one has to deal with the clinicians, the hospital staff, and of course the patients. And there have been a lot of learnings here. All the staff, all the doctors have gone through to some extent of anxiety, some extent of depression, stress. And I think reassurance has been something which has helped all of them to really come out. What I did was I made 4 groups of WhatsApp, and I used to send messages on those groups. All the 750 employees were included in those 4 groups, and it definitely reassured them. And me myself, when I required some help, I went to, I have some forums in Pune. I have some colleagues, Dr. Ashok Sham and other such colleagues who used to help me and gather my wits together. And of course, my father, who was always there in the time when I needed him. So positive communication, reassurance helped. We sat down in the hospital all together. We made plans of how to reorganize our systems. How will we face these adversities? And we soon realized these adversities actually brought out the best in ourselves, by planning, by making strategies, because each hospital, each situation had a different kind of a goal to achieve, and the problems to each hospital were unique. So I think definitely the technology has helped us. The technology has helped us to, be in it together, even though some people were working from home. We realized that all of us were together, and this pandemic time showed us to differentiate between our true supporters, true employees, and otherwise. Because when the going is good, when the times are good, everyone is with you. But when we were in difficult times in the pandemic, some people left jobs, some people said, oh, it's very difficult, and weren't really helping the management to face the challenge. And then this is the time you learned who are your real supporters and who aren't. Another important thing which I have learned in this pandemic is humility and gratitude. In India especially, and in certain African countries, we've seen people literally packed their bags overnight, had gathered all the gatherings, and this is a true photograph where they just took everything and started walking home from the state where they were working, and their home was thousands of kilometers away. And it was a very, very difficult time, I can say. But what we learned, that even though everything was closed down, people didn't get food, they were waiting in lines for food. We, the people who are in this webinar, I for myself, and most of us who might be listening to this, did not have such a difficult time. And I think that is what we need to be thankful about. We've got to thank and the Lord. We have to have faith in the Lord that ultimately will take care of things. And I think that is something I learned during the pandemic. Another important thing was strengthening the family ties, got more time with the family, and the relationships definitely improved. I think that's something which has definitely helped me. I think that is something which I have learned in this pandemic. I used to work about 16, 18 hours a day, but in this pandemic, I started going home early, and definitely my bond with my children, my wife has improved. I usually never used to have dinner with my children, but now I have dinner with my son, my daughter, and this pandemic has really strengthened the family ties and has improved the situation to a great extent. At a personal level, also, I have developed a lot, learned a lot, and a lot of opportunities have come to me from this pandemic. And I really feel that this pandemic has done more good to my personal development, I would say. My father always says, convert liability into asset. It's very easy to say in this pandemic, I am stuck inside and I have nothing to do, and it's really a difficult time then and complain. But definitely, this is an opportunity actually to see all what you want to do. And I have seen that in this pandemic time, I could achieve a lot of things which were undone in the past and I could not get time to do. I pursued a lot of my hobbies. I caught up a lot of on reading. I wanted to see a lot of movies, did that. And personally, this time was gratifying. At the same time, we were starting our new hospital project. This is the model of the new hospital, which is coming up next to the existing one. And initially, I never had much time, and my father used to always complain. But this pandemic gave me a time to get into the details of this hospital, and I can tell you that we have put in a lot of efforts, and the way the hospital is coming up is really well. So this pandemic has been a boon in a way for me for this new hospital project to give it all the time. And this is the time, if I give it time, it will definitely come up in a good way. I got time to introspect and rediscover my own self. I got time to understand my own value systems. I think that was something which was very important. You have time always, but you never find time to reflect or to introspect. So this is what I learned. I also learned that good times await for people who use bad times to become stronger. So these are the so-called bad times which are hopefully coming to an end, and we have used them to become stronger. And definitely we will be able to overcome this pandemic by staying strong. People say that money is not required, money will follow, and all those things about money. But I would like to say one thing, that money isn't everything, but everything needs money. So in this particular pandemic, what is the reason why we survived? We had funds, we had reserves, we could pay our hospital staff, we could do so many things. And I think it is important to have reserves and definitely save money, which can be useful in adversities. We've been faced with various crises in the past. We've had earthquakes, we had tsunamis, and many such critical issues in the past, and we have overcome them. I'm sure this current corona pandemic also we will be able to overcome. And anything in life is required to have a balance. And therefore, I think balance is something which is very important. Anything in excess is not good. And so also I would say about money, but definitely you need money to survive. You need money to overcome situations like this. And therefore, good planning and good saving of money helps. And that is something what I have learned in this pandemic. We have seen in the last 6 months, everything has come to a standstill. There is this so-called very famous temple in the southern part of India, and it's called the Balaji temple, where more than 12,000 people used to visit a single day. In the last 6 months, not a single person has gone. The Vatican City has closed, the masjids have closed. People used to go to Mecca and Medina to pay their worships. Churches are empty. So what do we learn from this? we really don't need all this and we can live without this. Life goes on. We were also so much dependent on entertainment, going to restaurants, bars, going to shopping malls, going for movies and having entertainment. All this has come to a standstill. Still in India, none of this has opened and we are still surviving. So what the lesson I have learned is that it's not necessary here to have all this in our lives. We can continue to live without them. That is an important lesson. One of the important lessons which I feel I have learned is about e-education, online learnings, so virtual learning. I think this one thing has not been good because people actually need to go to school, need to play, need to have their short breaks and the lunch breaks and mingle with crowd. Virtual learning is not the best thing to do, especially in an age group when you're in school or in college, because you need to enjoy the campus, and virtual learning sometimes is not best. You get distracted on the side, you're doing many other things and not concentrating. So I have my own children who are in their 12th standard. I have my sister's daughters who are in 4th and 6th standards, and it's not one of the best experiences, and that's one more lesson learned. As I come to the last part of my talk, pandemics has shaped history. We've had pandemics in the past. The plague, which was in the 14th century, actually claimed more than 200 million lives. After that, we've had the smallpox outbreak, cholera, the Spanish flu in 1918, which got more than 50 million people. And in the current pandemic of COVID, we've had about 1 million deaths so far, and we're still counting. But I want to say that this is a learning process. This is an ongoing process, and lessons are going to be learned, and we are still learning the lessons. We have not yet finished the pandemic, and more lessons are to be learned. I would just like to say that all of us are globally in this together. Everybody is affected, but together I'm sure we will survive this pandemic. Together we will thrive over this crisis and come over this crisis as winners. Importantly, it is a global issue. All of us know that we have evolved as from our ancestors, as who were the apes, who were the gorillas. We have had descendants who were cavemen, who survived and braved with very less resources. So today, even though we are facing this pandemic, even though this invisible virus has brought us down to our knees, I'm sure we will overcome this fear of unknown because we have the basic instinct of a caveman. That particular instinct will help us to tide through this crisis successfully. We have to adapt to the change. The art of life lies in a constant readjustment to our surroundings, and these surroundings of the current pandemic are there, and I'm sure we as human race have our intelligence, which we can definitely use to adapt to this new pandemic and adapt to what we need to change because of this pandemic. Friends, it's really been a journey in these last 6 months. All what I've said in the last 15 minutes or so, we all knew it. But this pandemic has helped me to understand these things in depth. This pandemic has helped me to perceive these things in a better way and help me to understand that the things which we knew are important and we have to really live by them and live by our own instincts. Friends, each person of us here today has had some issues. The pandemic has affected one and all. So these are the 10 lessons which I have learned, and I urge you today to learn your own 10 lessons, because what you are going through, what you may have faced in these last 6 months is completely different. And each person has his own set of problems, his own sets of issues. And I would urge you today to prepare your own 10 learning points, ponder over them, reflect over them, and I'm sure you will come out a better person, and this pandemic will definitely influence your life in a positive way. Friends, I wish to end on this note, and I want to thank Mohit Bhandari, Abhi Payne, and the whole team Ortho Evidence for giving me an opportunity to present my personal thoughts to you, the 10 lessons which I have learned in this pandemic. Thank you, Mohit. Thank you, Abhi, and thank you, the whole team of Ortho Evidence. Thank you.
Thank you, Parag. And what we'll do is superbly thoughtful and very introspective as usual. And I had expected that you would do just that. May I ask those of you who feel comfortable, come back on video, if you don't mind. And if you have a question or a comment you'd like to make about how this pandemic has had an impact on you, or if anything resonated from Dr. Sanchetti's presentation, please do share. While you're thinking about this, though, let me begin with one point, Parag. Can you just give us a sense of what the current situation is in Pune? So I know Pune has had sort of a surge in cases, and I'm wondering how just generally the current situation for COVID-19 has been. I'm sure that shapes some of your thinking.
The good news in Pune, Mohit, is that things are better. If you remember the last time I was with Ortho Evidence, we were going through a difficult time. The third lockdown had been announced and we were in a panic situation. Our being an orthopedic hospital, we were enforced to make one floor a COVID floor, and we had 35 beds which are COVID floor. And once upon a time, we had 4,000 cases every day in Pune being diagnosed as COVID positive. But today we are at three figures, about less than 900. Things are better, beds are available. We just have 6 patients in our 35 beds of the COVID ward. And overall, there is positivity. People are getting better. People know the problem, and the panic has reduced to a great extent. That is what I would say is the situation in Pune. And Pune, for your information, was one of the worst hit cities in the whole of India, and that's getting better. So I'm sure the other cities are also improving at the same time. So things are better. The good news is we understand the problem. The fear factor has gone down. The cities opened up fully. People are going for work, and things are improving at a very rapid pace.
Thank you very much. Anyone have wish to make a comment? I have lots I can ask, but I want to make sure everyone else gets a chance. Oh, yes. Okay, Dr. Desai.
So big lesson that COVID has taught, I think, or it's of simplicity is, I think we don't need conferences to educate ourselves. That's a huge time saver, I think, that one has learned from COVID.
Well, if I can so let me frame it a different way, because I think one of Parag's statements was that while we have adapted and while it's been very important for us to have this way of communicating, do you believe that lack of actual one-to-one or small group face-to-face interaction can ever be replaced by a virtual means? I don't think any of us feel that. I mean, I think we're trying to find a way because we don't have a source, but I do think that it's a good adjunct. I hope it doesn't become the only way we communicate, because I think as humans, we, to some degree need to be in front of each other, and it leads to all kinds of other things. And in fact, I believe that there was a question that was just posed. I think I see you. I think it's Naomi. You had said a question. Maybe you want to unmute and maybe ask this to Dr. Sanchetti, but it raises the whole issue of what do we do in a situation where we are distant?
Well, I was just wondering how the pandemic has affected collaboration with colleagues, both locally and internationally. Has it improved it, or has it,
Sure, that's a good point. So Parag, how would you, and anyone else feel free to jump in, but how has your international collaboration continued? How do you communicate with individuals outside of the institution?
So the international collaboration, the national collaboration has continued, and of course it's been virtually. It's been a record for me that in the last 6 months I haven't traveled out of the city. Otherwise I used to be out of the city at least twice a month, and completely I've been here. But the initial 1 month, people were just kind of gearing up, learning, and very soon they learned that virtual communication is possible. And we are in touch with many of our partner societies for academic exchanges, for knowledge exchanges, and things haven't really come to a standstill. But definitely one of the points which you made earlier, that we miss the physical conferences, the physical interactions. I think that will come back as soon as the regulations are relaxed, even though we may not be able to have, the AAOS has 30,000 people in its conference. So that won't be possible for the next couple of years. But in smaller groups, people will start coming together, and then things will improve. So to answer her question, the collaborations have continued virtually, and even though this pandemic kept us in our own offices, in our own hospitals, own homes, the communication was possible.
Yeah, and I think I would jump in and say, Naomi, to some degree, in some ways we've accelerated our ability to communicate, because I can tell you prior to February, March, I wouldn't have been doing video conferencing. I would have done email, I would have done some telephone, and I would have just physically just traveled. I would have traveled, and I think for those of us who travel, probably doing about 100,000 miles in the air. And you realize with all that extra time of not traveling, it's created efficiencies. The challenge a little bit is how do we affect meaningful collaborations and how do we actually get action? So moving, let's say, research, for one example, forward has a slightly different approach. But again, if you have committed individuals and you have a committed group of people, I think we've been able to see lots and lots of efficiencies move forward.
Yeah.
Any comments? Yeah, yes. Yes, Consultant Passion?
Unmute, please unmute yourself.
Okay, good evening.
Hello.
I enjoyed your lecture, Dr. Parag Sancheti. Remember me? I'm Dr. Levi Passion from the Philippines.
Oh,
And,
yes.
Right, yeah. Professor Mohit Bandari, it's so nice to see you again on Zoom. Huh?
Nice to see you again.
You were once upon a time a visitor here in our
POA.
association.
I remember that.
Yeah, POA, right. Yeah, I enjoyed your lectures.
Thank you.
Yeah, this pandemic has really changed the outlook of orthopedic surgery in the whole world, especially here in the ASEAN, and not only in the ASEAN, the Asia Pacific region, in which I'm very active in these associations. At first, in the local association, in the Philippine Orthopedic Association, the officers were a little bit discouraged at having to cancel, the usual person-to-person annual conventions, the monthly activities of the association. But nevertheless, it gave us new options, like virtual conferences now. Our national association has actually canceled the person-to-person convention in November, which is normally in November of this year, and it will be actually a virtual convention that will push through. It's still a 2-day convention, but purely virtual through Zoom. And regularly we have monthly or even every other week bi-weekly webinars in different aspects of orthopedics. Because we are in the training institution, our residents are actually getting less of practical applications, lesser surgeries because of the COVID. So no clinical applications. So, and especially in the hospitals, which are a little bit high in COVID patients, it is a little bit risky to do surgeries. So we do webinars, including live surgeries through webinars. And this is something which we never thought of before, We thought it was the end of the world if we don't see person to person for a convention. But nevertheless, of course, there is the absence of the personal touch, the personal, the relationship with our friends, meeting new friends and old friends in a convention. But of course, it did not stop the world of orthopedics. It just opened some new avenues.
Yeah, and I think you're absolutely right. And I think you're echoing what I think most of us feel. But let me ask this to our panelists here, which is the following. You spoke very eloquently, Parag, about, the changes we've had to make. The reality is that what we've experienced seems so important and so disastrous to many of us around the world because we've all experienced it at the same time. But if you look over history of time, this will be a blip, it'll be a speck, and it'll ultimately happen again. Who knows what will happen? Something will happen. What have you changed? And maybe I can ask anyone this, but I'll speak with you first, Parag. What have you changed now going forward that when this is over, and it will be, and we go back to the semblance of normality, whatever that looks like, what will be different for you? Like, what has this period of reflection allow you to change in your life in a way that you wouldn't have had we not experienced this?
Yeah, so I'll answer this question in two ways. Uh, First, professionally and personally and family-wise. I think professionally, it has definitely shown me that there are ways to work from home. There are ways to delegate and distribute responsibilities. There are ways to talk to your patients through teleconsultation. So I'm sure that even though this pandemic gets over, my working pattern, my particular style of working in the so-called pre-COVID area, and now when we are in the post-COVID area, will be drastically different. I would A, delegate more things, B, find time to introspect, find times to deliberate, talk of things, plan, strategize, which we never did. I used to just take one day at a time. And also things which I could not do because of the work pressure, I should find time for that and go ahead with that. So that's on the professional front. I think end of the day, we always talk about work-life balance. And for most of us as professionals and orthopedic surgeons, and for you as well, Mohit, work has been more and we've lost on the life balance, so-called. And I would say that this pandemic, I've spent most time at home, since I now see patients virtually and the work is less at the moment. I'm just at 30% what I do. I get time to reach home early. I reach by 6 p.m. and then spend time. I think that's one thing even I'm going to continue, even though the work starts full blast once this pandemic is over, because I think in that much time the work can be managed. So these are the two lessons I've learned on a professional front as well as a personal and family front, and that will definitely change a big time for me once this pandemic is behind us.
Oh, thank you. Is there anyone else who want to make a comment on how this has impacted you?
So Mohit, let me ask you, because you've been also, working as many hours before, and probably this 6 months you have worked more than what you have worked before, I'm sure. And so is true for Ashok, who's also on this webinar. So how things have been different for you, and what do you think will be your style of working once this pandemic is behind us, Mohit?
Yeah, in some weird way, I had started this transition 3, 4, 5 years ago, Parag, which was, less reliance on structures and more reliance on interactions with people, however we have those. And I had actually moved some degree away, like a lot, to these one-on-one interactions, which during this period of time have been generally allowed, as long as, we distance and things. So the one thing I have learned is, we don't need to be traveling as much as we need to for the sake of traveling. But I don't think that what we're doing right now replaces meaningful interactions with people. I think the most meaningful interactions we can ever have are always going to be person to person. And that just means you have to prioritize a bit more than you've done in the past. So I think that's been a big shift. I do think also that in many ways, slowing down and taking time, literally, and I mean this, to stare out a window and with a coffee or a tea or whatever that may be, and just be comfortable in letting your mind wander wherever it takes you. I would say I have had many more, you can use the catchword innovation ideas through doing less than any other time in the last 5 years. And I think a big part of it is we've been forced to slow down and take the noise that's up here and settle it down. So the good ideas that are trying to scream out can actually be heard once in a while. And I know you practice some degree of meditation, and I know others here also are advocates of it. But for me, that's been a really important part. I'm curious, and I know there's others here that do that. I wonder, actually, I see Yad here. Yad, did you want to speak a little bit to the issue of mindfulness? I know you think a lot about this, and how is that helpful during specifically times of stress?
Yeah, so thank you so much. Sorry. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, so I think, Mo, you said it perfectly well. Just taking time to sit with our thoughts has been extremely helpful. And I think mindfulness, a lot of people will a lot of people think that mindfulness is more about the thinking when it's the actual practice of doing, right? So it is a practice that you just do where you're comfortable just doing nothing or just sitting with your thoughts and letting them process and wander as they may be. But yeah, I think the pandemic has given people time to do nothing and time to sit more with their thoughts. And I think it speaks volumes when it comes to productivity because you have the time to let that noise settle away and really like focus on what you want to come out in terms of your production.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. Is there anyone who else who wanted to make a comment or had a question? I know we're a little bit over, but I think the discussion is such that you don't want to stop this when there's people who have issues to discuss. Ahmed, yes.
I have a quick comment. So I think one lesson also from this pandemic, it's how similar we are. So I think when we look at everywhere in the world now, it's we're having the same challenge always. We see like the same results. It's like a tiny little virus, but we have the same things to think about, and we're always trying to find approach to get over this. So I think it's a kind of a call for people to collaborate on a different level because we have the same problem, we face the same challenges. And I feel like it's a kind of a wake-up call for us, even if we haven't been collaborating across the world. So I think it's a good idea to do that now because it's very important. And I think you, Mo, set a good example for that in terms of global collaboration, how we answer a question that's important for everybody. So that's kind of one lesson I think I came to my mind.
Appreciate that. Is there anybody else who wanted to just make a comment? I know, Parag, you might know some individuals here. I see Ashok here as well. Maybe Ashok, did you want to say something about how things have been going?
Yes, so Ashok, I can tell you while he comes on.
Oh, here he is. Okay.
I'm really busy with Ortho TV. So Ashok,
Yeah, tell us.
Tell us something more.
Yeah, so like sir said, we already had a lot of ideas which we didn't implement during the earlier period. But now we have a focus, plus we got this huge technological infrastructure available to us. For example, this Zoom meeting, we are connecting internationally to so many people. What Mohit sir said, individual connectedness is important, but even this has achieved so much significance in our life that it's amazing how we are connecting all over the world. So I think that for me is one of the major things that in last 6 months that we have seen. And through this, we can actually see the trends that are happening across the globe, see how people are reacting to it, see how people are interacting and behaving in academic platforms, also on social platforms, also on other platforms. So, for example, I am in a unique position from Ortho TV point of view to see all these trends happening and a lot of avenues opening. So I think it has been really positive for me.
Yeah. Thank you, Ashok.
Yeah, just one last comment. The difference between what our ancestors were and what we have, what is the difference, is one thing for us, for the ability to speak and the ability to think. I think that has helped us to evolve and tide over the crisis and the so many issues which we have faced. And this pandemic, for this generation who has seen the turn of the century, who has seen technology evolve literally, and how they have faced this particular challenge. I think that's the most important thing for me, which has come out as a lesson in the pandemic.
And maybe before I give you the final word, Parag, I'll give my statement here as well, which is, you said something in your 10 rules, and I actually think it's a wonderful thing you've done. And I actually do encourage all of you to listen to Parag on this statement. Is take 5 minutes, write down 5, 6, 7, whatever that number may be, things that have really impacted you during this period of time. It's a personal list. Everyone's going to be different. There is no cookie cutter, but some things will resonate. And for me, I think the word that you said that resonated was humility. If this hasn't taught us to understand others. The world, as you see what's happening around the world, you see elections around the world, you see all sorts of things. You see, we get told all the things that make us different, and we rarely reflect on what makes us just humans and what makes us the same. And I think when you have that, some global issue that happens where it humbles us all, right? This has not had any impact. It's impacted every class, every country, every race, every religion, every person of disability and ability. We've all been impacted. And if we can't for one moment reflect on how this can change each of us individually, and more importantly, I think as the comments have been, how do we do this more, connect more, and how do we take advantage of what we've learned? I don't think that's going to help us move forward as, as a species going forward. The sad thing is we forget history. And the sad thing is we will look back in a few months, maybe in a year from now, and everything will have gone back to the way it was. And there'll be a few people crying the sirens of, remember what just happened, everybody. And I hope that there's enough of us crying those sirens that we can actually affect change. But on that note, I'd like to leave you, Parag, with the final statement. And thank you all for taking the time. I think these smaller groups are exactly what we need, short of actually physically being there.
Yeah. Thanks, Mohit. I just want to end on the note that humans can adapt to any situation, and we should have the ability to change and adapt, because things are always changing. Things are in a process of evolution. Today is this pandemic, tomorrow will be another issue. All we have to do is think how we can adapt to the change, and as they say, change is the only constant. Lastly, you spoke about humility and gratitude. Let me tell you, this particular pandemic has really shown me, how kind God has been, how much, our parents have done for us, and to face this pandemic in this situation. In India, especially, I can tell you, Mohit, there are millions of people who have no roof over their head today. They are in very difficult situations. So I think I take this opportunity to thank the Lord for having kept me in this position. And I have stopped complaining about small things. At times I used to complain, oh, the pizza has become cold, I can't eat it. This is not good. The aircon is not working. My seat is not reclining. Well, I'm over that. And we are in a better position now to accept these things and stop complaining about small things, and thank the Lord, and thanks to Him that we are actually in a comfortable position. Things could have been worse for us, but I really feel very much gratified to the supernatural power for this. Thank you.
On that note, I thank you all for taking part of your day and part of your evening to spend with us. And we will make sure that we disseminate this as widely as we possibly can. And we'll be looking to Ashok to help us with that as well. So thanking you all. Have a wonderful evening. And thank you again, Parag.